Bear Independent Podcast, Episode 3. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everybody. I have been told by my production team I have to come up with a cool name for the podcast, and it's just failing me. So at some point we may rebrand with something else, but for now, I'm Bear. This is a podcast, and I'm here with my brother and my friend, Jody. What's up, Jody?
What's up, brother?
How are you?
Busy, like everybody else.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's good to see you. I don't know the last time we sat down and hung out, and these are just conversations.
Yeah.
These are conversations with my homies because I'm super blessed with the people that the Father has put around me. Mm-hmm. And I think we as in our people group have a lot more experience than most at doing life together with each other and trying to live an intentional life in accordance with the Father's will and His instructions, which is why we get a lot of people who seek us out and ask, questions, ask for information, little bits of pointers, but which is why I want to have people on and have conversation. But you've been so busy, and I've been so busy lately. We haven't really hung out since
It's been a hot minute, dude.
I think Barnesville deployment.
Oh, for real, probably about that long, yeah.
Was the last time we had any real dwell time. So what do you do? Why are you so freaking busy?
Well, I'm a general contractor, and I've been blessed to the Father just blesses me with work, man.
Yeah.
And I've been blessed enough to take on some big projects for Grindstone. Mm-hmm. And I have a bunch of return customers, and so business is good. And in construction world, you got to get it while the getting is good.
Amen.
Yeah.
Yep. So when I was working with Harmony, my wife, a lot of people don't know, like, my wife was a general contractor, and when I met her, I had my own wind turbine company, and I met her, and I was like, "Here's this smoking hot chick that like knows construction stuff. Like, I think this one's a keeper, right?" And so I stopped doing wind turbines, and I started working with her, which is cool. Like, I learned how to cut crown molding from her.
Yeah.
A lot of the trim work that I learned from her, because I was framing. You get it within a 1/16 of an inch, maybe an eighth. Hit it with a hammer if it doesn't fit, that kind of thing. And but not that way. When you're working in these high-end houses, everything's got to be just right.
Yes, sir.
Perfect. And so we were in North Texas. You're familiar with North Texas.
Yes, sir.
And the clientele in that area. And so our goal was always to have at least one good job lined up over the winter. You're probably not going to make any money on it, but it'll at least keep the bills paid,
Yep.
right? And if you could just survive until spring, then the phone starts ringing off the hook again. And so, at the time of this recording, we're going into fall, so it's a good time for you to be busy.
Yes, sir.
Because otherwise,
yeah, and I'll tell you, I've had a contracting business in 5 states, and I learned a little trick. So I spent about 7 years building a business on the West Coast in California. And my brother's a contractor. His dad was a contractor. My sister was a contractor. So it kind of is just part of us. And I learned some tricks about building a business up from scratch in a new spot. Because when you build them slow and you have roots in an area, it's a lot different. Because as you grow, you meet people, and it's really organic. And so if you move to a spot, you don't have the same resources. You don't have the same other contractors to call. You don't have a clientele. There's like a lot of moving pieces, and my claim to fame is if I move somewhere and work is sparse and I'm having a hard time getting my foot in somewhere, I always go immediately to real estate and to property management companies. Give them a portfolio, a list of customers, and then that's it. And every single time I do that, I get work.
That's
just
cool.
Like that. Yeah.
That's
cool.
cool.
And it works every time, not sometimes.
So in your line of work, right, because you work with your hands, right? You're making stuff. What is the biggest or some of the biggest issues you're seeing in your line of work? Like, trends right now that are not good?
I would say that people that don't have the resources, the finances to fix basic stuff in their house, are hiring people for really, really cheap and getting poor quality out of the deal. And then eventually, it makes its way to me where I have to kind of unscrew
Yep.
several layers of BS to kind of bring it back around. And I know you're laughing because you're relating. I get it. So I think that for me, I think that the low end people are the lower end housing, I guess, are really struggling to get quality work turned out. And so for me, that's wonderful because I don't mind working with people who struggle.
Right.
Because I've been on the struggle bus most of my life, financially. And I think that it's a blessing. There's definitely people that I come across and they don't have the money. If I got it, they got it.
Yep.
Yeah. And so me and my guys, we always try to pay it forward. We remember what it's like to not have. And we always try to pay it forward. And I think the Father sees that and sees our heart condition. And, this is something I did want to talk about is having a servant's heart.
Yep.
Because you have one and I have one and our brother over here has one. And I think that you can see the fruit in the people that have it, and you recognize it, because there's nothing like pouring into your community or a community or a neighbor. That for me is more fulfilling. So I think that it's really important to pay it forward, and there's a lot of people that carried me along the way. And so when I run into the 90-year-old that's on Social Security and she just can't afford to get all the things done, I do my best for him. I do my best for him. And if I got to come out of pocket, then it is what it is.
Yeah, and you're absolutely right. The Father sees that and blesses it, right? Because one of the commands is let none amongst you be poor, And I think there's a fair number of people today who, they think they're poor because they've only got 3 flat screens in their house instead of 5, shit like that.
Yeah.
And, I grew up poor, like, hey, you're hungry, go hunt something, right? Praying it's going to rain so the potato crop is good out in the garden, things like that. And so it really helps to have had nothing in order to be able to appreciate what you have.
Absolutely.
And I think a lot of people in our society today have not really had nothing before, and we're in 2024, man. The economy is shit. The national leadership is shit. And I think there's, unfortunately, a bunch of people that are going to find out what exactly poor looks like, there's that meme going around like, these people are new poor. We're old poor. We've been here before. We know how to navigate that.
Yeah.
And a lot of what society considers to be poor is like stuff we do just because it's cool, like gardening, and with chickens in the yard and stuff like that. And, especially in contracting, it's like, I don't need $100 pair of jeans, What's that, Goodwill? I'm going to pick them up because I'm going to destroy these things anyway.
Yes, sir. Yeah, I think that it speaks volumes with the way the economy and a lot of societies looking at stuff like they're doing so bad. They don't know.
Yeah.
Like, try a mayonnaise sandwich and some hot dog water, bro. Then you'll know. You know what I mean?
Are you, because part of your company, the way you run your company, that again goes to that servant's heart, is you tend to work with a lot of guys that bring them onto your crew that are either first coming up or have had like a sketchy background, and teach them some life skills so that they can go out in the world and market themselves and build a career.
Yeah.
Right.
This is a great story.
Yeah.
This is a great story. It is. Go ahead.
So my question is going to be, are you finding the quality of those individuals, like young men are very frustrating sometimes, right? Because they think they know everything and they don't know shit, right? They've got a strong back, but oftentimes they also have a very strong ego, which makes it very hard to teach them. So like, how do you navigate that? Because you do have crews of these young guys that you're bringing up, and you got to put your foot in their ass sometimes. What does that look like for you?
So for me, I'm really glad you brought this up because this is part of my paying it forward. So to answer that question direct, basically, when their ego starts to get puffed up and they start feeling like they got it,
Yep.
I step back and I make them do my job. And I give them very little instruction. And then when they fall on their face, I teach them the right way. It all the way reels them back in. And it works really good because they start feeling like, well, maybe you're not working hard enough, or you got it easy, or this or this or that, because they're, moving the wheelbarrow or bringing lumber to you or whatever it is that's
Right.
that they're getting the workout on. Well, that's what you do when you're young. You move heavy stuff, and you're going to move it the rest of your life, whether it's for me or your wife or a family member or a buddy you're moving, you're going to do it. So right now you're doing it to make money. And so that's the biggest tool that I've got in my toolbox for that, is because when we're young, I was the same way, I'm sure you were. Our egos are like, I can do whatever. And or we think that possibly, for me, I thought I could possibly do what this guy was doing, like way better, until I got my hands on it.
Yep.
And then immediately it humbled me.
Yep.
And a lot of times when I'm teaching new guys, and I have them masking windows on a paint job or covering the ground with rosin paper and tape, like doing all this stuff, and that's all they're doing. And I'm in there and they're using a roller and I'm using a sprayer and I'm spraying something and they're just rolling things. And they're like, oh, he does a spray. Oh, come here, grab the gun. Now I'm gonna have you spray that, and I'm gonna show you how to put the right mill thickness on something and not have a big run and not have globs and starts and stop finishes and have a perfect 50-50 overlap and all the little details that you don't see. That is, my hands are trained for. And they don't want anything to do with it. And immediately when they blow their masking up, they immediately know that their masking sucks and they need to do a better job, because it only takes once cleaning that paint off that concrete for them to figure that out. And so there's a lot of humbling in construction because there's a lot of details. And if you're talented, like you and me, we have talents, right? If you're talented, we'll make it look super easy. But you'll miss all the little details of how we got there. And I think that's for the new guys. I've got one lead guy who's doing apprenticeship right now. He's got to do it for at least a year, and we'll see. But I want to get him to where he can either start his own business or he can take over mine at some point.
Right.
And then I've got two young bucks that are green as all get out. But you can usually tell if somebody's really interested, if they're investing in their future. The second paycheck these guys got, they immediately went to Home Depot and bought a bunch of tools. They don't even know how to use them yet. And they're just like getting all the things.
I was talking to them about it. It was awesome. They were excited about it. And little things like, what kind of hammer did you get? Because if you guys that don't know construction, girls that don't know construction, like a hammer is a hammer. Dude, there's a dozen different kinds of hammers, and it depends on what we're doing, And so it was cool to see them lit up about that. And construction is a great industry for young men. I can't really speak to young ladies. I mean, we have our director of construction at Caleb House is a young lady. She's killing it, right? But I haven't had a lot of women on my crews. And I'm not opposed to it, but I haven't had a lot of women on my crews. But it's such a good industry to be in because it's tactile. You got to use your hands to do it, right? But you also have to use your brain to do it, and it will teach you. There's physicality to it, but it will also teach you discipline. Because rework. If we got to do this over, rework costs 3.5 times the original work, right? Because we had to pay to do the original work. That's one. We had to pay to undo the original work. That's two. We got to pay to do the work again. That's three. And then the operational drag, the time that it took to do it, there's your half, right? And so doing something over costs you 3.5 times.
Oh, and there's drag when you're doing it over, brother. There's drag for sure. This is a drag.
So how did you get started in construction?
So this is the fun story that I got to tell you. It's a good story. So Some of you guys know my history that watch the channel. I chose a terrible path growing up.
Yep.
And high school dropout, problems with drugs and drinking, all the different things. And left home at an early age and just was running amok and never gained any skills to like be a man, to like do grown up stuff, to like pay taxes and be, self-supporting through my own contributions. I just never learned any of that stuff because I chose, street life, which is, it's just not the same thing. And it's a different mindset. And when I was coming out of that lifestyle, when I was getting cleaned up, I BS'd my way on a job site because that's all I knew to do. I BS'd my way on a job site. I told this painting contractor that, I can paint, and this and this and that. I worked with my sister, and which I did, but I kind of put it over the top a little bit. Right. So this guy is thinking he's going to have a guy to come help him, and he's getting right back into contracting. He went to appraising, '08, market crashed. He's pretty much out of work at that point. Went back to painting, and so he brought me on. I think 2 hours into the first job, I'd already busted a water line just because I didn't, never been on a job site really like that. But he knew I was full of it, and he kept me.
Yeah.
He kept me for a year. And what he did during that year is he made me do all the hard things. He made me do all the old school stuff, like when you paint a whole wall with a paintbrush, like a big 4 or 5 inch block brush.
Yep.
Old school, like before they had stuff, mixing my own paint, putting thinners in my stuff, using oils and lacquers and varnishes and like all the different stuff that the art of being a true craftsmanship in your trade. He taught me all of it. And at a year, I was clean lines, freehand, no tape, everything looked good, thick, nice solid coats, not splotchy. I could spray with multiple different types of guns. I could run all kinds of brushes. I had all my own tools. I had all the things. And I was like, hey, come look at this. And he's like, I don't need to.
Yep.
And I'm like, no, but come look how clean it is. He goes, I don't need to. And he goes, it's about time. And he fired me. He goes, now you're marketable. Go make a living for yourself. And I was so like butthurt that he fired me because I was finally like, I felt like I was putting out quality work and I got fired.
Yep.
And what he forced me to do when he fired me, he says, go make a living for yourself. He forced me to go make a living for myself because he knew that's the kick that I needed.
Yep.
And so when I train people, it is 100% me paying it forward.
Yep.
That dude, Tom, animal. I just talked to him the other day and I thanked him again. I said, thank you, brother.
That's awesome.
I call him every year and I'm like, hey, thank you so much. He taught me how to like do grown up stuff, and he stuck it with me when I didn't do, when I was just this little attitude hood rat jerk and I scared going up the ladders and him kicking the ladder. Get up there, you big badass, and he brought me around, and then he forced me to think outside the box and make a living for myself and not just stay underneath somebody's wing.
Yep.
And that's how I ended up being a general contractor. That was my first trade. My first love was painting.
Yep.
And I love it. I enjoy it.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Did I ever told you how I learned to climb?
Mm-mm.
So in upstate New York, my first business was selling firewood. It started selling firewood because we heated the house with firewood.
Yep.
And we needed 12 cord per year to not freeze to death.
Man, that's a lot of wood.
Yeah, man. Yeah, it is. And I'd split it by hand. I had a little 2-wheel drive Ford Ranger that some maniac had put the 1-ton leaf springs and rear end from an F-350 in. So I had 1-ton rear, pumpkin and everything on this Ranger that had a 2.3 4-cylinder in it and a 5-speed.
Sounds awesome.
And so there was a dirt road that ran the side of our property, and the back half of the property was all wooded. So I'd go back there, cut standing dead timber, back the truck up to the log, throw a chain around the log, throw a chain around the ball hitch on the bumper of this little Ranger, and leave some slack in the chain so I could take off. And by the time I'd hit second gear, the chain would pop and get tension, and I'd drag that log up the dirt road, out onto the highway. And I had to make this turn onto the Tulane County Highway and then turn again into my driveway. Well, there was a freaking mailbox across the street from the dirt road. Pete Hofsty. Pete, I'm sorry I destroyed your mailbox on multiple occasions because I'd come around that turn and there was a stop sign there, but I'd look both ways, and because I can't lose my momentum, and I'd just bang out onto the highway. The log would roll, hit the freaking mailbox and just shatter it into 1,000 pieces. So I did this over and over and over again, skidding logs with this stupid little Ford Ranger, and cut firewood for the house. And people would stop and ask. They'd see me because we're right on the county road right there. They'd see me cutting firewood. They'd stop and ask, "Hey, do you sell firewood?" And the answer was no the first 12 times. And then it turned into, "Yes, I sell firewood. How much firewood do you want?" And I was literally, my first firewood sale was loading handfuls of split firewood into the back of a Crown Vic that some dude was driving. I guess I'm in the firewood business now. And I had worked 2 summers for 2 different old school loggers in upstate New York, John Borg and John Deal. One was a German guy, one was an Austrian guy. And they taught me how to fell timber. Stand on the ground with a saw and put that tree anywhere you need it to go. And so I got good standing on the ground with a chainsaw. And then so people would, this was, back before cell phones and social media, AOL dial-up, and so it had a landline at the farmhouse, and people would call and say, "Hey, I got a tree next to the house. Can you come out, give me a hand, take the tree down?" Sure, no problem. And my deal was, I'd get it on the ground for you, and I'd cut it up, and then after that, it's your problem. You deal with the limbs and the logs and all that. Well, the phone rings one day, and it's this lady. She's got 2 little limbs, like 4-inch limbs over the top of her house. She wanted to know if I could come out and trim the limbs. And I'm in the middle of telling her, "Sorry, ma'am, I don't climb. You'll have to call somebody else." And my dad snatches the phone out of my hand and he goes, "Hell yeah, he climbs. He'll be there Saturday morning," and hangs the phone up. And I looked at him like, what the hell? Like, I don't climb. He said, "Go out to my truck." He had a baby blue 70s Ford F-250 with a utility body on it, blue with a white top on it, that from the factory came with a 427. Somebody took the 427 out and put it in the Mustang and put the 351 from the Mustang, back when you could do that. So he said, "Go out to my truck, back left bin, there's he called them galloping irons, climbing hooks, and a belt." He said, "Go get that shit and meet me at this tree." And we had a nasty, gnarly swamp maple behind the house. And the swamp maple has, the way the wood grows, it looks like God reached down and just spun the tree a few times. It grows in these spirals, and it's got these big sheets of bark. Everything's twisted. They're a pain in the ass to climb because none of the grain is straight. And that was a Thursday. I spent all day Thursday and all day Friday climbing up and down that tree while my dad screamed at me from the ground. "Don't do that. You're going to die if you do it that way." And when you said he was kicking your ladder and saying, "Get up there, you big badass," it made me think of that because it was nonstop for 2 days. I'd never climbed before. Nonstop, up and down this tree and out on limbs and over here. And all right, now stop right there. If you were going to cut that limb, how would you cut it? Nonstop. And I went out there Saturday morning to this lady's house. These limbs were like, the diameter of this Nalgene bottle. They're only about 30 foot up. It took me an hour to climb up there. And now, knowing what I know now, we were not going to spike climb a tree. We're just trimming, but I didn't know shit back in the day. Climb up there, cut these 2 limbs, keep them away from the house, get back on the ground, cut them up, throw them in the back of the Ranger, and I made $300 in an hour. And I was like, I think there's something to this climbing thing. And from then on, I climbed, but I would have never have started climbing if my dad didn't kick me in the ass and say, "Hey, go learn, go figure it out." And then it opened up everything from there. I went from the guy who was skidding logs with the Ranger and selling firewood in his front yard to 38 employees, 14 trucks, cutting millions of dollars of timber each year, and learned a lot about operating businesses. And I ended up selling that because I very quickly, as a young man, went from the guy who had the saw and who was doing all the work to the guy who was managing all the people doing the work. And I was so freaking bored, I didn't want to do it anymore. It was like doing payroll and going out and bidding jobs and looking at insurance claims and, oh, well, the F800 dump truck needs another starter and like all that crap. And I was like, this sucks. Like, I just want a chainsaw. I want to go cut trees. And so I sold it and I used the revenue from it. I put the revenue from it straight up my nose. So you talk about hood rat stuff. My background. drinking and cocaine, man, that was my jam. That and heavy metal. And I ended up in a really dark place for a long time. But the Father saw fit to bring me back, and here we are. So
Same.
So how did you get from California to eastern Oklahoma?
Well, it's a bit of an adventure, but I'll make it a quickie. So, in I think it was '99, you couldn't talk to me about Jesus. If you said that word, it was just I had nothing for you. That's not my jam. All I heard when I was a kid going to the First Baptist Church was, if you sin, you're going to hell, and there's nothing you can do, you're going to sin. I'm like, well, I'm burning then. I don't want nothing to do with that. It's like, like it just wasn't my thing. And so I ran from that belief system. And I think that if you run long enough and he really wants you, it don't matter how hard you run. He's going to smack you back where you need to be. Yeah. And I listened. He showed up for me. And so I had a little bit different experience. Some people have an educational variety of a spiritual experience. Some have burning bushes.
Yep.
I had a burning bush. And he showed up, changed me. I had a guy prophesying over me, basically reading my mail that was from Australia that I never met before.
Yeah.
Specifically, not like in general, it could have meant anything. No, very specific. And it didn't really matter what he was saying so much as inside something happened. It's like he reached into me and was like, hey, I love you, and I'm here, and I know you, and I know what you've been through. I've been here the whole time.
Yep.
And it was like, come back home. And I was just, waterworks, and it changed. I couldn't look at the world the same after that. Well, fast forward, I'm a slow learner. Fast forward, I don't know how long it was. I guess maybe 18 years later.
Is that all?
Yeah, that's it. Yeah. So, I'm a real slow learner. So
I don't think you're a slow learner. I think you're stubborn, and that's a good thing.
Yeah.
Because I'm also stubborn, and B, it takes time for that window of understanding to shift.
It does. And I'm glad that I didn't really stick with that modern day Christianity that I was with.
Yeah.
Because what I didn't know is that I was learning a lot of catchphrases that sounded really good at Sunday church or from a pastor, or
right.
little, self-help type little preaches. They were great for that kind of stuff, but they didn't, there was a gray area that I knew that didn't make sense. That was a little hypocritical. And there was no definition in some things that should have immediately out the gate should have had definition. Like, what is the biblical definition of sin?
Right.
If I'm being saved from sin, if I'm being set free from that bondage, what is it that I'm not going to offend again?
Yep.
There was no clear line anywhere. It was just this gray area. It's like a fairy tale thing. It wasn't biblical. Like, don't, fall short of the mark. What verse is that? And what exactly does that mean? And so my wife, when I got married, my wife didn't have the same belief as me, because I knew the God of the Bible. I knew he was real. And I knew that Yeshua was like the dude.
Yep.
Right? I knew that he had mediated for me, between me, the Father, for me, right? And my wife had a similar experience. 5 years into our marriage, we were at a tough spot. He showed up for her just like he showed up for me. And 2 months after that, from coming from a homeless junkie on the streets, fighting tooth and nail to get, I guess, the American dream, the white picket fence, living in the suburbs with 2 beautiful, nice finance vehicles, leather furniture, big screens, boat in the garage, every tool I could think of. Sold it all and bought a 5th wheel and just started traveling the country looking for where I was supposed to be.
Yep.
And that's how I got here.
And you didn't just end up here. I mean, you guys, you toured the country a good bit, didn't you?
Yeah, definitely.
So what would you say, because I know there's a lot of people who are listening You know, you're wearing the shirt that I almost wore this morning, which is funny. You know, Pastor Joe's shirt, Kuham, come out of her, my people, lest you partake of her sins and receive of her plagues.
Yeah.
Revelation 18, verse 4, I believe. I know there's a lot of people who feel that conviction, but don't necessarily understand how to be obedient to that conviction, how to enact that. What do they do? Like, what did that, maybe talk through what that looked like for you, because you went from the American dream to a fifth wheel. You sold all your shit and you're up.
Yeah.
Right. And I get it, because we did something similar from Texas to here, and everybody we know is from somewhere else. But like, what encouragement do you have for the people who are out there listening who are maybe feeling that need to spiritually relocate, strategically relocate? Like, what next?
I love this part. So I've actually talked about this with a lot of people over the years on what that entails, because people talk about it, but they don't grasp it.
Right.
For me, I believe that the Father moves people strategically. You know, it's not a tactical move. It's a strategic. You know, it's long term.
Yep.
You know, it's not just the immediate quick fix. And so if you're running from something, usually the quick move ain't going to work for you. You got to be pretty grounded in what you are. If you're seeking something and you're looking after him, like, where do you want me? What am I supposed to be doing? Where are my people? Where are the people you want me with?
Yep.
You know, those questions bring you to where you're supposed to be.
Yeah.
Like, whatever your will is, I'm willing to do it. In a handbasket. That's it. Make the leap.
Yeah.
That's my suggestion. Make the leap.
The
impossible will all the way become possible.
Well, and that's where the miracle's at, right?
Yep.
Like, that's how you know it's Yah that's doing it, because inexplicably you get what you need. You know, we have some neighbors that moved here from Florida, and I mean, they're more than neighbors, but they are also geographically neighbors.
Yep.
And they got a date. That's what Yah gave them. They knew they were moving. All they got was a date. They didn't know where they were going. And so it's an awesome story, and I should probably have them on to tell this story at some point. But they got a date, and they started, and they were living the American dream too. Big family in a big house, making big income, and the father was just smashing them with like, will you be obedient or not? And they're like, to what? And he's like, do what I told you to do. And they're like, okay, like, what's that? And he gave them a date, this date. And it was not 9 months out. It was like 6 weeks away, right?
Yeah.
And so they started selling everything, putting, packing up what they needed, selling everything, Facebook Marketplace, stuff that, oh, that's worth $1,000. Cool. Can we get $80 for it? Like, just get rid of it, liquidate it. And then up until the day before that date, they still didn't know where they were going. And it's an amazing story.
Yeah.
But they ended up here. And I think that's what obedience in action looks like.
Yep.
And so you might not know where you're going, but if you know that you're going, you need to start preparing to move. And I agree with you strategically. The Father's people move. Like, even Messiah, Herod was trying to kill all the babies. Imagine that. What a pattern of behavior there, right?
Sounds familiar.
It sounds familiar. Herod was trying to kill all the babies because he did not want Mashiach in the land, right? Because if you're king of Judea and the king shows up, who's in charge now, right? He didn't want to lose his job, and all the benefits that come with the job. And so Messiah, Joseph and Mary take Messiah to Egypt, Mitzrayim, so that he can be stewarded there while Herod's killing all the babies, persecuting all the Israelites, so that when it's safe, when that king dies off, then they receive word and they come back from Egypt, back into Judea. So Mashiach is now in the land. So even Messiah did it. Like, Messiah's parents had to make a strategic move. They had to move. everybody, this story of the Bible here, everybody moves about the battle space. And one of the things that I've talked a lot about with us, the us that are here, we're all from somewhere else.
Yep.
We all felt that calling of the Spirit to come here, and then we were obedient to it. I'm not convinced that we're here forever. I think at some point the Father needs us to move again.
100%.
And he got us. This is part of the separating, the sifting, because there's a group of people here who have already moved at least once because the Spirit said so. And so the next time the Spirit says, hey, you guys are up, go. Okay, we've done this before.
Yeah.
You know, and I don't want to leave all my stuff. It's like, shit, we've already left all of our stuff once before.
It's just stuff, man.
And now we have a multitude of witnesses. And so if the Ruach, the Holy Spirit, comes to me one day and it's like, hey, you got 72 hours. And I'm like, hey, Jody, I got to talk to you. And you're like, 72 hours? I'm like, son of a bitch.
Yeah.
Yep. And then it's like, well, we should talk to Dud. And Dud's like, hey, did you guys get 72 hours? It's like, oh, gosh, here we go.
Yeah.
We're up, you know. And it's very similar to how we deploy Grindstone.
Yeah.
You brought up Grindstone earlier. It's like, if I got 3 or more people saying, hey, boss, are we going? The answer is we're going.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
So for everybody who's listening, who's feeling that pressure from the Ruach HaKodesh, don't be disobedient. Ask Dad, not even where am I going, when am I going? And then set your house in order so that you can go, and he will reveal where you're supposed to be.
Yeah, I mean, he did that for me and the wife. And so, like, when you get married, 2 become 1, right? He's not going to tell me one thing and my wife another thing if we're in unity, right? If we're in the Spirit, if we're both studying, we're both following the same way. And the day that I knew, when he's like, you got to go back. And I'm like, what do you mean I got to go back? I just left there. I'd been in Arkansas for some time, and I, had a little church hurt thing. Ended up going back to the West Coast. And he's like, you have to go back. And I was like arguing with the creator of the universe. Like, it's like, if you could,
Yep.
And I'm like throwing a little kid fit. I'm like, I just left there. And he's like, go back.
Yep.
And I'm like, I'm racking my brain trying to figure out how I'm going to convince my wife that just went through all that with me to go back.
Yep.
And I got home and I had it was the Spirit, right? I had this weird feeling when I got there, and my wife is grinning at me, like in an odd way, like there's something going on. And I'm talking to her and I'm like, hey, I need to talk to you. And then she starts smiling at me. I'm like, what's going on? What are you doing? And she's like, what are you doing? And I'm like, all right, what's going on? And right before I got the opportunity to tell her we had to go back, she holds her phone up and she's looking at land in Arkansas. And she knew that we had to go back.
Yep.
He changed her heart condition and led me, and boom. And that's how it works. And so, like, if you're gonna go and you're married,
Yep.
He's not going to tell you guys different things if you're supposed to go.
That's a great word.
Yeah.
On that note, let's take a quick break. And speaking of, you got to go back. Yeah, we'll be back in a minute.
I'm keeping him alive.
Okay, is he not breathing?
Barely. Hey, one more breath.
Okay.
One more breath. There you go, Danny. One more breath. Yes. There you go, Danny. Good job. Just stay with me, okay? Okay? There you go. Good job, Danny.
Is he breathing?
He's barely breathing. How many times did the tell you?
Okay, you know what, ma'am? You could deal with yourself. I'm not going to deal with this, okay?
No, my friend is dying.
All right, so we're back. You brought up church hurt. You just kind of glanced right over that, but we know a lot of people who have church hurt.
Yep.
I have had church hurt, and I know the Father used my church hurt in order to separate me from the milk of the word, so that I could be weaned from the milk of the word, so that I would learn to eat meat. And I'll read to you from Hebrews, our buddy Paul, Shaul of Tarsus.
My dude.
In Hebrews chapter 5, verse 12, it says, "For indeed, although by this time you ought to be teachers," you know enough by now, you should be teaching. "You need someone to teach you, again, the first elements of the words of Elohim." What are the first elements of the words of Elohim, right? Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, Deuteronomy.
Yep.
Right? "And you have become such as need milk and not solid food. For everyone partaking of milk is inexperienced in the word of righteousness, for he is a babe. But solid food is for the mature, whose senses have been trained by practice to discern both good and evil." And so we need that weaning process. We're not supposed to stay on the milk. Right? I don't want to be like a babe. I'm not a baby, right? We need that. At least I need that, and I've seen this pattern of behavior. You know, Messiah calls us sheep, right? We are his flock. Well, I have sheep. A bunch of us have sheep.
Yep.
I've watched many a lamb be weaned, right? And the mom kicks the animal off of her, denies access to the milk, so that it will learn to eat the meat, eat the grain, eat the grass, all of that. And so church hurt for me was that weaning process, the kicking me away from the milk so that I would have to learn to eat meat on my own. And that revolutionized what my faith looks like. I tell people now tongue in cheek, because it at least gives them a frame of reference to understand I'm so Christian that Christians don't like me anymore.
Yep.
And I'm good with that, because I'm a biblical literalist. We are biblical literalists. You know, as Brother Don said, and everybody took the phrase and ran with it. Read the book, do what it says.
Yep.
That's it.
That's it.
That's it. That's what we do. So in the concept, or in the vein of church hurt, what do you see in your observation the mainstream Big C Christian church, the 54,000 different denominations, what are they getting wrong? And then also, because we are followers of Messiah, but we're also human too, what are we getting wrong? Like, where do we have room to improve?
Well, that one's something that I give great thought to here recently, actually, because you inspired me to start a YouTube channel, Buckets and Bibles, and I started it off originally for the purpose of homesteading stuff, because you inspired me, but it turned into a little bit more Bible than buckets.
Imagine that.
Yeah, but what my experience is that I would go on this big church or a home church or either one, and there would be some really good stuff. The Spirit would move, and love and compassion, and these wonderful things would happen. And then there would be some kind of self-help message, or some kind of something that they'd cherry pick one verse and then turn it into this sermon that had nothing to do with what it was actually talking about contextually.
Yep.
And that was frustrating to me. And there was a lot of gray areas that if you move from denomination to denomination, you would have a huge hypocritical thing. Like, it's okay here, but not okay here.
Right.
And it didn't seem right, and something was off, and I knew it. And I think that they got a lot of stuff right in the Big C church. They got the Spirit, and they got the love, and they got the compassion, and they got some good worship.
Yep.
But truth.
Yep.
Truth. They're missing the truth of the scriptures, because if you're not grounded in truth, it's really hard to truly worship, because we have to worship in truth and spirit, right? And truth. It comes from the Word, and the Bible defines the Bible for me. It explains itself, and there's prayer and discernment that comes along with that, and there's tons of examples of first and second and third and fourth witness throughout the Scriptures, from the beginning to the end of the book, that you are going to keep his commandments, his statutes, his right rulings forever,
Yep.
through all your generations, until, like Messiah says, until heaven and earth pass away. Not one jot, not one tittle, right? And you're going to have the testimony of Messiah and his compassion, his love, his sacrifice for us. So it's not one or the other, it's both, right?
Yep.
And so this conclusion, it filled the void of the gray areas that I didn't have. I wasn't getting fed. And I pivoted, and he did the same thing for me that you said, as he separated. He's a good shepherd, right? Messiah's a good shepherd, and he separated me from where I was going and brought me back into the flock, his flock, right? Not this created one, not one I was trying to start myself, not one that some other guy started, but his. And the beauty of that is the church hurt was absolutely necessary. There's a few things that used to say a lot on some of your live streams back in the day that you were a huge tool that the Father used to bring me to the way. Two things. One is you challenged the way that I thought about the scriptures versus what they said. Okay? You challenged my thought, and you proved it. You challenged it with scripture backing in context. And I think for me, it's like, I was like, nah, I don't say that. And so I write the verse down. I go, oh, dang, it does say that. And instantly I had a conviction because truth.
Yep.
Right? So that conviction, and then you act on it. Because when you see it and you act, you're obedient, then fruit comes. And the other thing was subcontracting your faith. Absolutely did that. 100% guilty. I had people in my life that I thought were Christian giants, like were the real deal. And I subcontracted my faith to them. Yep. If they said this is what it meant, I didn't proof text it. I just took it for what it was, and that's what it meant, and that became my doctrine. Mm-hmm. And I didn't check it out. I didn't say, oh, well, the scripture actually doesn't really say that. It actually says this. And that's what I do today.
Yeah.
You know, and that's the challenge. If you think you know what the scripture says, in context, show.
Yep.
Prove it. You know, like look into it yourself. Don't just take what me or you say. Go look. Like, this is what the scripture says in context, and it's backed up by other scriptures that cross-reference into that, and it's very plain to see in black and white.
Yep.
It's not if you search for truth, and that's the prayer that got me. If you search for truth, his, and not ours, not yours, not theirs, you search for his, you're going to find it.
Amen. One of my favorite things about the way that we fellowship and the way that we study the Word is that we do a midrash.
Yeah.
And so it's odd for me. I'm an ordained pastor, right? And that's what, talk about like life plans. I would have never in a million years. Hey man, you know, you're this coke addict, drunk, you know, satanic heavy metal drummer, and it's like, bro, you're gonna lead a flock of people for Messiah. It's like, you're on some acid, bro. That's not happening. Well, the Father had other plans, and here we are. And I'm a noob at being a pastor, right? Like, I'm under a year in as of the time of this recording, and I all the way do not have it all figured out. And so, but what does a pastor do? A pastor's a shepherd, right? Jeremiah 3:15. I shall raise up shepherds over you after my own heart, says Yah, that will feed you with knowledge and understanding. And so, like, what's the job of a pastor? Well, be after Yah's own heart, feed people with knowledge and understanding, and shepherd them, right? So make sure they have provision, protection, blessing, right? And even then with the concept of sheep, like, there's lots of sheep. Not all sheep are my sheep. Are they in my field? Cool, they're my sheep. Did they run out of my field into somebody else's? They're not my sheep anymore. Yep. Did somebody else's sheep wander into my field? Well, there's a Torah for that. I'm supposed to keep hold of this sheep and take care of them and restore them to the other shepherd that they came from if I can, right? Unless they intermarry, interbreed, whatever. So there's a lot of clear direction there. But just because I'm the pastor doesn't mean I know everything. In fact, I don't know everything. And that's the cool thing about a midrash. When you're surrounded by brothers and sisters that also study the Word in context and are eating the meat of the Word, when we get together and we read the Bible, it's a real Bible study. It's not one person presenting the Word and saying, hey, this is what it means. We have real genuine midrash where there's other people there, and the best part are the questions. Hey, what does that mean? because the way we run it is like at one person if whoever's hosting usually takes the first chapter and just starts reading.
Yep.
Right. And then, next, who wants next? Who wants next? Who wants next? And somebody will raise their hand. I'll take it. Okay. They take the next chapter and the next chapter. And we read the Torah, the first 5 books. Then we read something out of the prophets. Then we read something out of the New Testament.
Yep.
And somebody will ask a question. Hey, what does that mean? Oh, and now we're on a side quest.
Yeah.
And that side quest might be a half an hour long.
Yeah.
But everybody's talking, and everybody's sharing all this scriptural knowledge that they have, and everybody leaves there smarter, more educated, deeper in the faith than they were when they got there. And that's really spiritually profitable in my mind.
Yeah.
Much more so than, I'm Pastor Bear. Today flip with me to Galatians. Today we're going to read Galatians 3, and here's what it means. And don't ask any questions because I don't know the answers, and I don't want to admit I don't know the answers. That doesn't help anybody.
No.
I love being able to say, hey, I don't know. Let's figure that out.
Yeah.
And that has been one of the things with me as the Father has prepared this pathway for me over the last decade is I've had to get really good at saying, I have no idea, bro. I don't know, but I know where to find the answers. We're going to pray over this. We're going to ask the Father to lead us, and we're going to read this book, and we're going to see what we can come up with. And I think that, just from a pastoral role, is way more impactful to the flock than saying, well, Jody, here's what you got to do. X, Y, and Z, go do that. And you're like, well, but you didn't answer my question.
Yeah.
You just told me what to do. I didn't learn anything. And then we get to learn together,
Yeah, I think that the beauty of fellowship, especially with us, because we're not like most people.
Yeah.
We're a little rough around the edges. A lot of type A's,
Yep.
and when you have a bunch of awesome people, because our women are freaking powerful and amazing, dude. I mean, they're I don't want nothing to do with fighting them girls. They're badass. They all have a chunk to throw in there.
Yep.
And I value and I respect when I hear a brother or sister speak on something that they've done a study on, or even ask a question when they're not sure about something, because that all of that is way different than anything that I've experienced before. And it is, like you said, way more fruitful for you and us, for sure. And I haven't found, I've been all over the place and people and done all different stuff, and I haven't found anything like this. I found some counterfeits of this, but nothing like this.
Yeah. Praise God.
Yeah.
So you brought up earlier the Christian church has the Spirit. They have this love, this joy, right? All of that. And one of the things I think we can do better, us, and I guess by proxy, everybody who's listening, right? Brother Richard. I got to have Brother Richard on this show. But he and I get together regularly and talk. He's so freaking wise, man, when it comes to the word.
Yeah.
And one of the things I love about him is he is incapable of pulling punches. And so if I'm all dicked up, he will tell me.
Yep.
And he'll tell me in love, but he will all the way tell you and not mince words. And I need that, right? I need people who have the integrity and the courage to tell me when I'm messing up so that I stop messing up, right?
Yeah.
I need that. And I was talking with him the other day, and we're just catching up, and he's like, how are things? And I'm telling him all this stuff. And because it's another part of the pastoral role is like I carry a lot of people's burdens on my shoulder, right? And so I have to be strong enough to do that.
Yep.
And I have to be strong enough in my own faith and in my relationships with my wife and my children. My house has to be squared away so that I can adequately accept the burdens of others, right? Positions of strength, so that I can help other people. But if I'm all messed up, I can't help other people. And so he and we're just having a conversation around all this. And he looks at me and he says, brother, do not lose your joy. I was like, what? He goes, we are commanded to be joyful. And he said, you can't lose your joy. He's like, even in all these trials and these tribulations and everything that you've got going on personally and everything else that people are laying at your feet and say, please help me with this, because you can't lose your joy. We have to remain joyful. And he's like, you have to understand, which is funny, the concept of joy coming from Richard, who's, a battle dwarf. You know what I mean?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
Most people on the surface would not look at Brother Richard and think, oh, that's a joyful MFer right there. You know what I mean? But he is.
He is.
And he loves Messiah, and he loves the Father, and he loves his brothers
100%.
and sisters. And his joy is in that. And so it's a great, in that instance, it's a great model for me to replicate, right? I think one of the things that the Torah observant community, and I don't like labels, as you know.
Yep, I'm tracking.
Are you walking in the way? Are you Torah pursuing? Are you messianic? No, we read the book, we do what it says.
Yep.
Just like I'm not into any one of the 54,000 different Christian denominations. And beware the leaven of the Pharisees, by the way.
Yeah.
And so I don't like labels, but I think people who are reading the book and doing what it says, a lot of the times we understand who Messiah is, I think, better on the meat side versus the milk side, right?
Yeah.
And we understand the statutes, the right rulings, the laws, the instructions of the Most High. We miss that joy in the Spirit a lot of the times, and it can become stodgy, you know what I mean? And I think our particular assembly, we're beginning to do better at this.
Yes, we are.
Meeting for prayer meetings, worship and fellowship, and we're getting better at this again. But it's I liken it to a three-legged stool, right? You've got the Father, and this always brings up questions of the Trinity, which maybe we'll touch on in a minute. But we've got Abba Yahuwah, the Father, the Creator, right? The One, which comes from Deuteronomy 6, verse 4. Shema Yisrael, Yahuwah Eloheinu, Yahuwah Echad. Hear, O Israel, Yahuwah is our God. Yahuwah is one. Right?
Yep.
One. Not 3, not 17. This is not a polytheistic belief system. It's monotheistic. There is one God. But these facets of how we experience this one God, we have the Creator, the One, right? And then when he becomes flesh to dwell amongst men, which is not just a New Testament construct. We see this all throughout the Old Testament. This is Yeshua. This is Messiah, right? Who did Joshua bow down to and do obeisance on the road into the Promised Land?
Right.
Right?
Yep.
That's Yah made flesh.
Yep.
Who went and smoked Sodom and Gomorrah and ate with Abraham? It's Yah made flesh. Who did Jacob wrestle with? Yah made flesh. And on and on and on and on.
Oh, capital M.
Capital M messenger of
That's
Elohim.
right.
That's right. And so that this is Yah made flesh, and he has to become flesh to contain the awesomeness of that one, because he told Moshe, no man can look upon my face and live. And that's why Jacob, literally, he erects a monument and calls it Peniel, because I have looked upon the face of Yahuwah and lived. Mm-hmm. So who was that, right? That's Yah made flesh.
Yeah.
And then we have the Ruach HaKodesh, the Holy Spirit, which is this emanation of the thoughts of Elohim that speaks into a man's mind and into a man's heart. Mm-hmm. And so I liken it to like text messages from dad, right? It's message. They're messages that come from the Father to us so that we can understand what his will for our life is. But they're all Yah. But this three-legged stool, if you pull any one of these legs out, the stool falls over and it's useless. And so in Christendom, they've got Messiah and they've got the Spirit, but they don't have Elohim. They don't have Yah. In Judaism, they have the Spirit and they have Elohim, but they reject Messiah.
Yep.
Right? And we're over here in the middle, just like, guys, let's read the whole book and do everything the book says. And so we've got all three legs, but we oftentimes forget about that joy in the Spirit. And I think that's something that we as a faith group can do better, is remember to be joyful. And, oh no, you're going through some shit. Everybody's going through some shit. My brothers, count it all joy when you fall into various trials for the proving of your faith. Mm-hmm. Right? And when James wrote that, his homies were being killed by the government.
Yep.
And we're over here like, paycheck's a little light this week. I'm giving up on my faith. Or this thing that happened in my life didn't happen the exact way I wanted it to happen. God is unjust. I don't feel like worshiping anymore. And it's like, James is like, they are killing my best friends.
Yeah.
They killed the master for the proving of your faith. And so I think if you know, like the apostles singing hymns in prison, right?
Yeah, brother.
And we're like, oh my gosh, gas is $4 a gallon.
Yeah.
You know?
It's all small potatoes.
Right.
Yeah.
And so we look for things that are, where our brain is hardwired to look for things that are bad, not look for things that are good. And we need to be looking for the things that are good and be operating with joy in the spirit better, I think.
Yeah, I agree. And I think that you used a phrase, and I think I would say that we get a little complacent in knowledge and wisdom and less in moving in the spirit, you know, because there's, it's not that we don't have it. It's that we don't plug into it, and we don't plug into the joy and the love and the compassion for everybody, as much as I probably did before, you know. And I think there's a weird law when you're coming into this that you kind of have to gather it back up and then remember your first love. You know, It talks about in Revelations, you know, like, remember your first love. Like, what did you do at first, you know? And at first, I praised and worshiped. At first, I moved in the spirit. First, I was abundantly overjoyous because of the compassion and mercy that I felt through the Messiah from our Father.
Yep.
And it changes, you know, when you start getting knowledge. And you got to remember, like, that piece that's in our toolbox, it's a muscle we got to exercise. You know, that's like, it's super important because that attracts, you know, that attracts.
Yep. Well, that's, you can read in the epistles of Paul, that is the perfect Torah, the one of freedom, right?
Yeah.
And it's not that the Torah, the commands were nailed to the cross, because that's an abomination. Read Colossians 2. That's not what that says. It's because you can read throughout the major and minor prophets. When Israel was doing what the Father said to do, they weren't doing it with all of their heart. And he smoke checked them for it. And then when they definitely weren't doing what he told them to do, they're worshiping other false gods, but whoring, idolatry, paganism, he smoked them for that too. And he talks about in Joel, tear your heart and not your garments, right? Like, get your heart condition right.
Yep.
And I think that that's from Messiah, we get not only the example of how we're supposed to keep the Torah, not this Pharisaical religious bullshit, right? That's why he's constantly rebuking the Pharisees. Religion versus faith, right? I'm not religious. I'm deeply faithful, but I'm not religious. I don't ascribe to a religion of man. I ascribe to the words of Elohim. But do it in love, which is what Messiah is teaching. If you look at the Sermon on the Mount in Matthew chapter 5, all these contrasts that he's doing in the end of Matthew 5, he's talking about the teachings of the Pharisees versus the teachings of Elohim in love. And we're supposed to keep these commands in love. You know, Matthew 22:36, what are the two greatest commands in all the Torah? Okay?
Yep.
Love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your mind, with all your strength. Deuteronomy 6, verse 5. So love Yah with everything you've got, and love your neighbor as yourself. Love. Both of them there. Well, what does that tie into? The 10 commands. Half of them are up, down. That's how we love Yah with everything we've got. The other half are left, right. It's how you love your neighbor as yourself.
Yep.
Like, I'm not going to covet any of your shit.
Yep.
Right? We're not going to cheat on each other's wives. I'm not going to steal shit from you. I'm not going to bear false witness. That's all love, right? But we're supposed to do that in love, not legalistically, not where can I find a loophole here? I'm not supposed to bear false witness about Jody, but if I say it this way, then it's not. No, don't talk shit at all.
Yeah.
That's why Messiah is like, don't call your brother an idiot. Raka. That's murder. You've murdered him with your mouth. Like, don't look at that one with lust in your eye, because that's adultery.
Heart condition,
right?
all of it.
And so it's like, there's a line up to, where's the line leading up to fornication? It's like, why are you looking for the line leading up to fornication?
Yeah.
Right? Like,
Yeah.
don't even look at that woman with lust in your
Yeah,
eye.
exactly.
And that's the balance there, the completion of the plerau, the embodiment of Matthew 5:17. Right? I come not to destroy the Torah of the prophets, but to complete it. That word plerau means to embody. And he's like, and look at the love and compassion that he had. It's like, so I'm going to keep these commands perfectly without sin. 1 John 3, verse 4, no transgression of the law. But I'm going to show you how to do it in love.
Yep.
So that it's, come to me, all ye who labor, my yoke is easy, my burden is light. It's not a burden. It's not going to choke us to death to have to do these things. We should want to do these things because they're acts of love, not only to our brothers and sisters who are also fearfully and wonderfully made, they're also children of Elohim, but to Elohim to show him that we love him. And people talk about, well, you're not justified by works. No, by grace through faith, lest any man should boast. It's not an issue of justification. It's an issue of sanctification.
Yep.
Going from the milk to the meat, right? I have the love. Now I need to know what to do. But then once I know what to do, I still have to do it in love.
Yep.
And that's the completion there. That's the Torah of freedom that I think a lot of people misunderstand, and we get it wrong too.
Yes. Yes. And I think it for me, it's always a gut check when I go into like 1 Corinthians 13.
Yep.
What is love, right? What is love? And it gives you a checklist. There's not a day that goes by where I hit all those marks with all my people.
Mm-hmm.
I always fall short. And so that should be like something that we constantly remind each other of what this looks like and the standard of which we should be operating in, right? Yep. And it's a tall order for
patience
anybody.
Patience and kindness and gentleness.
All that.
Yep.
All that. And it's every time I read it, I'm like,
100%. I'm not gentle. I don't know if you know. Maybe you do know.
I do.
I'm not gentle.
Yeah.
I have to try and be gentler with those who need me to be gentle. Like, I have accidentally, I didn't intend to, but I have made women who have come to volunteer with Grindstone cry on several occasions because I'm in full-blown bear mode. For real. And EF5 just wrecked this freaking place. Yeah. And we're out here and we got to get shit done. And I'm barking orders and I'm using my big boy voice because my construction background and we got stuff to do, right? And I have unintentionally made sisters of ours cry because of that. And I shouldn't have done that.
Yep.
Right? Like it's kind of like Paul's talking about, like when I was with the Romans, I acted like the Romans, right? Like, know your audience. And so there are absolutely times where I have to be full-blown bear with knife hands and screaming orders at people. But that's not always. And, like, even that one facet, and then that one facet, I know I have to improve on that. It's certainly not the only thing, but it calls to light, here's an area of improvement for me. And that's what Paul's talking about when he said, I knew not sin but by the law. You have to have something to compare it to in order to know where you have room for improvement.
That's a good word, man.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a good word.
So, what else you got on your heart?
Nothing, man. Nothing, man. I'm so grateful that you brought me on here. This is great. I hope that the viewers are getting something out of this, really.
Yeah.
Yeah, this is... basically me and you sitting around talking at a fire anyhow. You know? We're just like recording it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
One day, a year from now, when we have the budget, once Dudley gets this room perfectly set up, we'll abandon it.
Yeah.
And we'll sit around the fire and he'll be like, I don't know with the microphones and the button. It's like, I know. Yeah. Dude, you're so flexible.
Yeah.
Bless you. Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, man. I really appreciate you coming on. We always have really good conversation. And like I said, that's the point of these podcasts, is to have conversations with people that I love and that I respect. For A, it's good for me, and B, I think it's good for everybody else.
Yeah, I agree. And if you're looking for fellowship, Friday nights, shameless plug, Friday nights, we go live on Buckets and Bibles, and it's a lot of Q&A. We get random people on there that come on with some doctrine that they learned, and we give them proof text to look up for themselves, and it's a good time.
Yeah.
So if you're looking for that, usually have between 30 and 50 people on, and it's a really good time. There's a lot of fruit that's coming out of it.
I think that's awesome. I was going to ask you how people get a hold of you, and just to reiterate, Buckets and Bibles YouTube channel. You guys are doing awesome.
Thanks,
you and
brother.
your wife, and it's been super cool to see how Yah has grown the two of you over the years. And I love you, and you're amazing.
I love you too, brother.
Shalom.
Shalom.